Okay, when we found out that our next speaker, Vishnu Swaminathan, was moving from India to the United States, we wrote him and asked if he would join us here. It didn't matter that he was moving to Washington, D.C. It was closer than Bangalore, his home at the time. Vishnu works with Ashoka, an organization credited with nothing short of helping create the very field of social entrepreneurship. In his work with Ashoka, Vishnu has sought and supported system-changing social entrepreneurs, taken on affordable housing across India, built an initiative to help every child master empathy. How critical is that? And advanced Ashoka's mission of creating a world where everyone is a change maker. This organization is important, if not indispensable, to our movement, and we are honored to welcome Vishnu today. Please join me. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. When I first told my colleague I'm going to Portland and speak on ancient mythology to future technology, and I said, oh my God, I have no freaking idea of what ancient mythology is. So she looked at me very convincingly and said, you know what? With a shaved head of yours, with a red dot on your forehead, and with a name like Vishnu, you should be able to pull it off. Come on. So the disclaimer is that I'm not a specialist on ancient mythology, because what happens is whatever is closer to home, we tend to ignore it, right? So when you grow up with so much of mythological stories and so much of mysticism around you, you can kind of take it for granted. But I did, after at least getting invited for this conference, it gave me an opportunity to go back and research on some of those things. And that's what I'm going to share it with you. And also about connecting it to social change and social entrepreneurship. So if the connection is not that strong, you have to bear with me. So I'm going to start with this, 2 lines. When I was growing up, I think when I was 16 or something is when first somebody taught me this. It's a prayer, right? Meaning we say it like a prayer in India whenever you want to go to a temple, or whenever in the morning you're supposed to say this prayer. So it reads, I'm going to read it in Sanskrit just for you to see how it sounds like. It says, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Now, one thing you all at least saw it was Purnam was getting repeated so many times. So the word Purnam in Sanskrit means it's absolutely complete. Now, that's the word Purnam, right? Now, so you read the English transliteration, it says, whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete by itself. So now, when you go into this philosophy and Hindu philosophy and understand, this literally talks about your soul, that you are part of something larger, and you are also as complete as the larger being, or as the larger soul, supreme soul, whatever they call it. Now, this was actually discussed many times with scientists on how does this affect to science. And people couldn't figure it out. I think we are still in the process of figuring out what does this really mean. If you take something from something, that still remains complete, and whatever you got also is complete as a part of that. So I'm going to leave that with a thought, and he remains in complete balance, and that's very important. This is the Ishopanishad. Now, the other thing which I think I moved to United States only 5 months ago. So since I've been here for 5 months, one thing I really got fascinated is yoga. Right? Hey, honestly, come on. We don't attach so much of importance to yoga as much as Americans do. And it is crazy. So, if you look at the word yoga, it actually originates from yuj. Now, not many yoga institute probably teach this. Yoga actually means to unite with something. To unite is the word yoga. And, somebody pointed out that religion also is all about that. It's about going back and uniting something. So the word yoga is about uniting yourself with something, the knowledge, the absolute, etc. Now, I found this online and maybe it's fascinating. It says that 80 million Americans practice yoga. I don't know, we have so many doing it in India. I was really fascinated. What's very interesting is $16.8 billion in marketing. This market is $16 billion or $17 billion. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, so I'll move on. Now, Patanjali is the man who literally wrote about yoga. So he's the man who wrote what was called the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Again, a few thousand years ago. Anything to do with India, you have to go like that, right? You cannot talk about in tens of years. I remember this small story. I was actually visiting a small historic town, and our objective, meaning a group of friends, said, we will go to places which are minimum 600 years old, right? 600 years old, either there is a temple or something there, we'll go and find out. So at the end of 11 days, we went to 70 such places which were minimum 600 years old. And people used to say, oh, that's around like 2,000 years old. It's been there for many years. We just don't attach so much of importance. And it's always about size and depth. But anyway, so this Patanjali, the man who wrote about yoga, describes the 8 steps of yoga in 2 lines. So this is the 8 steps of yoga in 2 lines. Now this is important for you to understand because he talks about yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. And pranayama, probably all of you would have heard about what it's breathing and all of that. So what it talks about is harmony with your body, respect for others. Right? Meaning, yoga starts with first step of yoga is to respect others and yourself. And then you talk about asana. Asana is then, once you finish your respecting, then you start performing the bodily movements. And then you control the energy, and then your thoughts, and then your emotions, and finally you reach ecstasy. This is what he said. Now, why is this important is because, again, this. Now, this again fascinated. Americans, give it to them. To all of you, sorry. Now this is an amazing yogatrail.com which gives you a map onto how to make a decision of what kind of yoga you should be doing. Guys, I'm fascinated. Do you prefer to keep your clothes on? Meaning it's there. I'm not saying it. It's there. So, that one word in the previous verse of asana, and maybe 2 words, pranayama and asana, has given birth to so much. Right? I counted, I think it's, except Pilates, I think there are around 18 or 19 different kinds of yoga. It's unbelievable. Now I know where the 17 billion comes from. Anyway, so what I'm trying to tell you is that a small 2 words of the earlier stanza has resulted in so much. Then not to talk about mindfulness, right? Meaning mindfulness is fascinating. I love mindfulness, But it's also 2 words from the previous thing which has given birth to mindfulness as a huge movement. People have done an amazing job. Corporates are talking about mindfulness. It's amazing. Now, the last 5 things, only the 5 things, I could go on, probably I didn't research enough. Those are the scientific evidences of all of this. What is it? Meta-attention. Wow, fancy. High-resolution perception. Stay with me. Response flexibility. Neuroplasticity. Well, only when we say such things, we believe what we are supposed to be doing, right? So I think all of this to lead to say that a small fraction of yoga has now become this huge movement of what is possible with the human body. So stay with that thought for a minute. Earlier Vidya shared with us the story of the battlefield, right? So in the battlefield, the charioteer was the person who was enlightened. So he was the one who was sharing this knowledge with the person who was bewildered and didn't want to fight. So in that discourse of, I think it was a 50-minute discourse which happened. In that 50 minutes, he covered the entire knowledge of many things, which led to creation of what this book is called, Bhagwat Gita. And in that, there are these 4 kinds of yogas. Now, whatever we saw as one fragment of yoga fits everything into that thing called Ashtanga yoga. Ashtanga means 8 steps of yoga, right? So that's the 8 steps what we earlier saw. But there are other kinds of yoga called Jnana yoga, Karma yoga, and Bhakti yoga. Now, these are all paths which are described extremely in detail. What can you do with it, etc., etc. Now, Karma yoga is very interesting. I'm going to just talk about Karma yoga and then we move on to social change. Karma yoga is very important is because it talks about you can live your regular life, but can you live your life in a way that you do whatever is to be done, but don't get attached to the results? Now, why is this important? Because I somehow feel social change is somewhat like that, right? Social change is about dedicating yourself to change something which is a problem, but if you get too attached to it, then you are not allowing it to grow. So I'm going to pause there and move on to, the most important thing I wanted to point out here is that transforming the civilization by good of all. So we are basically talking about how do you make social change as a good of all process. Now, again, one other thing I wanted to tell you before we move on, that battlefield story, who was watching all this? How did we know what happened in the battlefield? Right? Meaning it's a battle going on, 2 people talking to each other. Who was documenting it? So there is a story behind this. There was a guy, a bloke, who was blind. Sorry, you couldn't see. But he was sitting some few hundred miles away, and he was actually able to see everything what's happening in the battlefield. Talk about technology. Right? And then, there's in the same Vedas, we repeatedly hear this thing called Vimanas. Vimana means a flying object, meaning it's a clear definition of a flying object repeated some 20, 30 times in the Vedas. It's about flying machines, which is aeroplanes, right, as we know. And this is few thousand years ago, right? So when I wanted to talk about technology and future technology, my teacher said, ignore the technology part. There are so many tools and so much of fun we can have, but let's go back to the science. So before we go on to the science, this is another famous guy who lived again some 2,000 years ago. This is a Tamil language. So he basically said this very famous line. It says, Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir. So this is really the core of social change, in my opinion, where we need to aspire. We spoke about global village in the morning. This actually says to us, all towns are one, all men are kin. This was translated in 1906, so he only said men. But I think it refers to everybody is our kin. And this is what we need to keep in mind while we talk about social change for a minute. Now, when I looked at social change, I wanted to place in front of you 4 concepts. One is, instead of getting attached to our organization, we need to talk about the impact of the idea. Not the organization, but the idea. I'll go about it in a minute. Holding on to letting go. It's very clear in our ancient scriptures that you cannot hold on to everything, but you have to let go. Complex to simple, and scaling up to building a new reality. Now, all what I'm going to talk to you today may not be the ones which you would probably like to hear when you give a perspective of a business. I'm not against social business or capitalism. I used to run companies before I joined social change. So I'm completely aware of business models. But what I'm trying to say is that you can expect a business model, but let's give it a little bit more time. I'll talk about it in a minute. So whenever we talk about social change, the first question we ask any new social entrepreneur is, what is your business model? Now, I am particularly against that, because I have seen again and again and again social entrepreneurs with no idea of a business model eventually creating one. So eventual is the word here, right? So this is Anshu. Anshu is a fascinating guy. He used to be a journalist in New Delhi. This is year 2001. He was going back home after a cold winter in the night. He actually literally saw a 70-year-old man pushing a three-wheeler cart with a dead body on it. And the dead body didn't have anything to cover itself, right? Meaning it was really bare, almost bare. So Anshu stopped and said, what happened to this guy? So the 70-year-old man said, nobody wants to claim this beggar's body. This is my job. I dispose of these people, give them a good ritual. But he died because it was very cold and he didn't have cloth. So Anshu goes home, like all of us do. We go home. He opened his wardrobe and he saw that he had some shirts and coats which he has not touched in a year's time. All of us do. Probably women do a lot more. Right? Now, he was very disturbed. He quit his job in the next month and he decided to start this organization called Goons. What does he do? He collects cloth, used cloth, but not torn cloth, used cloth, repurposes the cloth and gives it to people who don't have cloth. Now, you tell me, if Anshu was standing here before 10 years and saying, this is what I'm going to do, what will all of us say? Buddy, where's your business model? What are you going to do here? This is Robin Hood, taking from the wealthy and giving it to the people who don't have it. But guess what? Anshu still did it. Anshu became an Ashoka Fellow in 2004, and currently Anshu collects every single month 100 tons of used cloth, 100 tons of used cloth across India, and he repurposes them and gives it back. Now, where is the business model? The business model has come. What he realized is that when you have cities, when you have people in the cities, I have 5 minutes, thank you. So, in the cities, people people have waist sizes which were like, very elastic, we're all 30s and 40s and stuff like that. But in the rural areas where Anshu was distributing these cloth, the waist sizes were much tinier. So he had to cut a lot of cloth, repurpose them. So he was cutting a lot of cloth. And he said, well, oh my God, I'm actually wasting a lot of cloth by collecting this cloth, but I'm still cutting it. But then he realized that the cut cloth, he can make it into sanitary napkins. So today, Anshu makes India's largest number of cloth sanitary napkins which can be reused. Business model? Yeah, got it. Right? So anyway, you got the story. It's about impact first, model next. Model is important. Now, letting go. You might all be surprised, why is Elon Musk there? You could replace the photo if you don't like Elon with maybe even Professor Yunus from Grameen Bank. Now, the idea is, when do you let go of your idea? Right? 2014, I think June 2014, if I remember the date, Elon stood up and said, all our patents from now and in future will become open source. Now, that's very counterintuitive to what you will do if you're running a business. Now, that's what changed the electric car industry, in my opinion, not just the electric car industry, but also it changed the way you look at electricity. Right? Now, the same thing happened with Professor Yunus. Professor Yunus created Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, and how far was Calcutta from Dhaka? Calcutta was just next door compared to, even other places in Bangladesh. He refused to open a branch in Calcutta. He said, that's not my job. He invited people like all of us into a room and said, please take my model, run with it. You go create your own Grameen banks. What did he do by doing that? He created an industry called microcredit. All of us here have the potential to create an industry, but don't worry about your organization. Create an industry, and it's very much possible. This is my favorite Ashoka fellow. His name is Bart. Bart, when he was a child in the Netherlands, he loved rats. I don't know how many of us love rats, but he loved rats. So Bart, when he was growing up, he loved rats, and later on when he was growing up, he realized that there were a lot of landmines in Africa which was exploding, right? And they couldn't use anything else to detect the landmines. High technology and all is great, but not at that time. So what did this guy do? He trained his rats to go and smell for landmines, because rats are very good in smell. They can, dogs are equally good, but dogs are heavier. They get blown up, right? If they go to step on a landmine, but rats don't. So that's a landmine, what you see there, and a rat is sniffing, and there you go. A model was created. What is the cost of training a rat? Really tiny. And literally tiny. And then, he has detected some 40 million hectares of land free for agriculture in the last 10 years by just rats. Now, he didn't stop there. What else rats can do? He actually was in Africa. In many parts of Africa, tuberculosis is a problem. I don't know nothing about tuberculosis. He figured out that people with tuberculosis, their sputum smells of tar. You know the tar they use for laying roads? So he trained rats to detect tuberculosis. Beat that. Rats as health workers? Meaning he did that. Now he has saved 40,000 people detected early of tuberculosis, and it's just 2 years of work. Now that is the power of when you take something and you apply it somewhere else. You can all do that. All the work what you're doing, so as social entrepreneurs, you can apply something into something else and models will follow. You will make a lot of huge change, but that's possible. The last example I want to talk to you about is again a very interesting project in Cambodia. When we all grew up, many of our grandmothers, if you can go and ask them, they will tell you that they used to cook in iron vessels. Why iron vessels were important? Because it gives out iron. You don't have to consume iron tablets. Now in Cambodia, the biggest problem is anemia because women were not getting enough iron from the food and the families were suffering. So a group of Stanford researchers from the US went to there and figured out, oh, you cannot make them change their habits to cook in iron pans. What do? You design a fish which looks like an iron. All you do is, whatever they were cooking, drop this iron fish inside the food, cook normally as you do, take it after you cook, wash it, use it the next day. By doing this, the family gets 75% of iron requirement of the day. By just reusing that iron fish for 5 years, you can keep on using it. Simple idea, don't make it complex, no mindset shift, nothing. It's possible. So let's think simple, right? That's the whole idea. Now you get the trend of what I'm saying. But anyway, I just want to close with this. All of us love direct service. All of us want to do direct service, and that's how we learn social change. We go and do something, we solve a problem. Then what do? We understand the problem, it's great, you replicate it. I'm done, 0. You give me 1 minute, please. Replicating direct service. You go and do it once and you want to do it again and again, you replicate it in multiple places. Then you change a system, right? How do you take the idea of a Grameen Bank? Grameen Bank initially started in Chittagong. He opened up multiple branches across Bangladesh. He didn't come to India or any other country. He said, now come, I'll give you my system, you go do it yourself. That is the idea of letting go. You have to let go in the right moment so that it becomes big. You change a system. You change the system of banking. And what is the last one is framework change. How do you change the whole framework? How do you create a new reality? Today, nobody has to go and convince people that you need to offer banking for the poor. Everybody is automatically stepping in and doing it. Ashoka, as an organization, we started 30 years ago. Nobody understood social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship? What the hell is that? Even today, fellows come to say, am I a social entrepreneur? Yes, you are. Now, if you are a social entrepreneur and if you are a young person, your family, somebody is telling you, don't worry, buddy, you'll be fine. There is this organization called, there's a summit called Elevating Impact. You can go there, you can meet them. It's great. It's taken 30 years, but we have come to a stage where social entrepreneurship is understood. And that's what Ashoka did. Now, I want to say all of this and tie it back to what we started, right? Meaning all of this is fantastic. All of this is great. But I believe that all of this still goes back to transforming your own self first. We have to enable people to transform themselves. In our work, can we make sure that we go out and say, not only I'm going to give you a product, I'm not only going to give you a service, I'm not going to give you a great life, but can we help them to transform themselves? Why? Because many, many years ago, again a few thousand years ago, this concept was born which says Vasudhaiva Kudumpakam. Vasudhaiva Kudumpakam means the whole world is one family. Imagine such a beautiful saying. How can you treat the whole world as one beautiful family? This is what is absolutely needed for the future. We have to, our hearts have to beat for someone who is suffering wherever they are. And that is when you feel the whole world is one family. How do you do it? It's not about just, transforming yourself sitting under a tree and meditating, but it's very clear. You're always clean in behavior, in accordance to established norms of conduct, and free of all attachments in life. So easy to say. From inside, he has renounced everything, even though outwardly he would appear to carry out worldly duties. However, unlike the small hearts of ordinary people who discriminate by saying, this one is a friend and that one is a stranger, these great men are magnanimous hearts and embrace the entire world as their own family. All of you, all of us, have this beautiful ability to be those magnanimous people. Let's go see this world as one great family. Thank you very much.